And to take us through this wonderful topic, we could have imagined better person than Anand Lakshminas Varahan. And he comes with illustrious experience. I'll tell you why I'm using the word illustrious. And before I hand over the platform to him, let me have the pleasure of introducing and also justify as to why did I say it's illustrious. Now, he has got, if you look at his education, is a phenomenal, I would say, the breadth of education that he has had. One is, the IIM Bangalore MBA. Other one is he has done certification, cutting edge ones from Indian School of Business, Stanford University, as well as edX. That's just about the education part. And he started his career with a great brand called Siemens, that is as an engineer, between August 1999 and June 2001. And after that, he was with GE, another marquee company, for 2 years as senior application engineer. And after that, he was with another great company. I would say that's the one that Jack Welch always wanted to take over. That is Honeywell, and he was with this company for 6 years and 2 months, right? As firstly as a project manager, then product manager for Honeywell Process Solutions for 1 year and 8 months. And after that, after the stint at Honeywell, he was with Wipro Technologies as consulting partner, ONG Downstream Digital and Domain Solutions, April 2010 to March 2018, 8 years. So I think that's where I think the foundations of the IoTs, right, and all the AAs and the digital transformation part of it has begun. And he was, I would say, was there from the beginning of this entire phenomena as it got unfolded. And after Wipro Technologies, he was the Group Chief Digital and Information Officer at Vedanta Resorts Limited for 4 years and 2 months. That is between March 2018 and April 2022. And since April 2022, he has been, I would say precisely May 2022, he has been Group Chief Digital and Information Officer, which he is currently holding at the Jubilant Bhartiya Group. And like I said, when I was talking about before, we started with just interacting. He was saying that there's so much that he wants to share. I'm sure on digital transformation, like I said, I put in the chat box also that you will have very actionable insights because there are a lot of buzz around digital transformation. There are courses, there are enough and more LinkedIn posts that you keep seeing, white papers, reports, you name it. I think you would have been seeing, right? But then there is somebody who, with us today who has gone through it, who has seen it, who has made it happen, and entire architecture itself. So he's going to take us through another. Not just the digital transformation, but also some of the myths that most of us have, or many people have it. And therefore, let's get to hear from the person himself, Mr. Anand. Over to you, Anand, and thank you so much for joining us. And over to you, Anand.
Thank you, Dr. Nagendra, for the kind words. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Nagendra and Times Pro for this opportunity. And thank you all for joining on a Saturday evening. I'm sure particularly this generation probably has many other things to do. So it's really good to see people joining in, wanting to understand and learn about what's happening in the industry as far as digital business transformation is concerned. Let me try and share screens here. Just 1 second. Right. So before I really delve into my experiences of how digital has transformed large industrial conglomerates, I just wanted to flash this for all of you to sort of give a flavor of. This was like a few years back when I was to speak at a forum. I sort of sat down and thought about what has been my own digital journey over the last 20 plus years, right? And I said, why don't I map out what has been the journey on the personal side and what has been on the professional side? Because many a times we talk about digital today as though it is something new. But when I actually sat down and thought about elements of digital that had been there in my own personal and professional life, I could date it back to somewhere in the mid 90s, right? So as you would see on the personal life, I think my trust with digital, if I remember correctly, started with what is called a 486 based PC. Some of you here may not even have probably experienced that microprocessor and at that time, but that's where I think my journey started. Um, and if you look at somewhere in the mid 2000s, again, today we talk about the metaverse, the virtual world, where you could go and do many things. Second Life, if some of you have heard about it, existed even then, right? And I do remember that I myself have spent a lot of time on Second Life, playing and gaming and so on. And in fact, even at that time, particularly in the Western countries, I think there was a significant movement in terms of people trying to spend time in Second Life, which was essentially a virtual world where you could buy cars, you could, go for a ride with your girlfriend, or you could buy land, you could buy whatever, right? And in fact, even companies started using it for advertising, shoes or any other consumable, durable, appliances that people could go on and buy there. And then, of course, there was proliferation of the social media, the smartphones, and whatnot, right? And I think I don't need to preach some of this to the digital natives that are listening here. And on the professional side, I think I recall my Dr. Nagendra talked about my stint with GE. I think way back in early 2000s, I still remember digitization was a very common word. I think a lot of focus on how you can automate things within your own work sphere, right? And we used to get certified as what is called as a Six Sigma green belt, where you're able to automate portions of your work, save time, improve productivity, and so on. So really the point is digital, both in personal and professional life, I think has been around in the last 2+ decades, right? And I am very sure that if some of you sit down to pen your own thoughts on your personal and professional lives, I think you're going to probably have a lot more icons here than what I have got, right? But having said that, I do think that there are a few key trends in terms of what has changed over the last, let's say, 5 years, if you like, right? One is the exponential rate of change, right? I think if you look at the last decade versus the last 5 years, I think the amount of data that is getting created in any industry is exponentially growing, right? If I talk about manufacturing, for example, there are assets and equipments which are instrumented with sensors which are generating massive amount of data. To give you a sense, let's say take a compressor or a pump in a manufacturing plant, we get data every second or every 5 seconds, and these are data about temperature, pressure, flow of the fluid that is flowing through the pump pipe. It could be ambient type information, several such information, but every 5 seconds or every 1 second you're getting information about it, and then you store it and are you able to analyze it, right? So one, and it's not only in manufacturing. If you take the, let's say, the insurance sector today, whether it is a car insurance or a health insurance, companies want to tap into the data, health data that is available from wearables that all of us wear, or connected automotive, right? Whether it is a bike or a car, today you have a lot more digital data about how the driver's performance is and so on, and that gets relayed back to a cloud, and then the insurance companies would leverage that data to provide a more targeted premium for their consumers. So take any industry, massive amount of data, very rapid change in terms of how data is proliferating within these industries. So that's one trend that you see. The second big thing is when you have this massive amount of data, how do you consume it? How do you consume it to create insights that will drive actions? In the same manufacturing example that I took, this could mean that if a particular equipment has failed 20 times in the last 2 years, now you're able to use that information to see how you can predict when that equipment will fail next time. And by that, the way it helps is obviously you're able to maintain the equipment much ahead, and reduce on your maintenance costs, reduce on capex spend that you will need to have to buy new equipment and so on, right? So again, I think the other big trend is because there is massive amount of data, there is a lot of focus on saying how do you monetize that data, how do you start building insights out of that data, right? So that's another key trend that's going on. Third one is what I'd call decentralization of everything. The easiest way to understand this is the Uber and Ola that we use all the time. I mean, again, if I rewind back about 15 years back, if you were to book a taxi, you would call a local person that you knew, and they may have a fleet of taxi that they will assign. So you're essentially calling a person who owns a fleet of assets, and it's very central, right? You've got to go to an individual and then they try and assign it. But think about Uber or Ola. There is no ownership centrally. It's completely decentralized and democratized. All of the assignment of a car to the customer is happening through an algorithm, right? So essentially, a lot of platformization and decentralization is another big trend that we see in several industries that will disrupt business models, that will change business models. That's I think the third big change. And finally, I think it is about integration and interconnectedness. What I mean by that is take a manufacturing organization again. In a typical manufacturing organization, we are talking about raw materials coming in from a supplier or a set of several suppliers. Then it comes to the manufacturing plant where it gets processed. And then, of course, it gets shipped to various customers as finished goods. Now, traditionally, of course, each of these were silos, and there used to be exchange of data and information between these entities, but it was not real time. It was not near real time or integrated. But increasingly, most industries are starting to have a very integrated and interconnected value chain, which means that the flow of material and money, right, is very, very integrated today. It has become more efficient because you're able to seamlessly share information and integration with different companies. So in summary, I think while digital has been around for a few years or many years now, I think there are a few trends that are starting to shape how this space is overall evolving, right? Now, shifting gears a little bit, and I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with this, but I'll just quickly touch upon what we in a manufacturing context called as Industry 4.0. I think as you see here, somewhere in the late 1700s is where we had the first mechanization, the steam power, and that's when automation in some form really started from manual labor, right? And then, of course, it accelerated somewhere in the late 1800s in terms of ability for industries and organizations to produce in mass, creating assembly lines with electrical energy being there. That's then accelerated automation of production of goods in somewhere in the late 1800s. And then, of course, mid 1900s, we're talking about the computers. And once the computers came into being and people could write programs, I think started automation. In fact, artificial intelligence that we talk today, I think, there are algorithms dating back to somewhere in the mid 60s or early 70s, right? So that's industry 3.0. And today we talk about industry 4.0, people call industry 5.0 or X.0. There are various terminologies, but in essence, what it means is we are creating what are called as cyber physical systems. And to understand this in simple terms, today, if you have a fridge or a washing machine or a table or a chair, that's just a physical object. The moment you start instrumenting it, the moment you start putting sensors in it, that tells some attribute about that physical object, you're essentially creating a cyber physical object. If it tells what is the temperature inside that, you've already created digital data about that physical asset, and you've created a cyber physical system. And moment this data gets connected to the internet, to a cloud, where you can use that data and drive insights, you pretty much created what you might call an internet of things, right? So you had a very physical asset, and you instrumented it with digital data and moved that data over the internet to, let's say, a central cloud environment where you can analyze and drive insights from it. That's really, in a very simple term, what Industry 4.0 is, right? And when you talk about Industry 4.0, generally people talk about these 9 different, what we may call concepts or technology or paradigms that make up what is Industry 4.0. But before we get there, why do we need this, right? I think, and this is a question that typically in an industry setup like us, and in roles such as what I play, we would ask, right? Why do we need to use these technologies? What's the benefit, right? So if you look at a large industrial manufacturing organizations, obviously operational efficiency is an important metric, which essentially means, are you able to produce the output that the customer requires at the most optimal way? Which means, can you use lesser raw materials to produce the same quality and same quantity of finished goods than what you were able to do earlier? And today that's possible using machine learning algorithms, or artificial intelligence, as we call it, because you're able to analyze a lot of past data, look at inefficiencies in the processes that produce that goods, and then see how you can course correct and put the right optimal parameters to be able to produce it. So operational efficiency is a key metric which could result as deploying some of these technologies. Cost reduction, yes, again, if you take a manufacturing organizations, the biggest costs are raw material cost. It could be power and energy, which is a bigger cost as well. You could look at people. People make up a large cost. We need to pay salaries, and there is cost around people. Increasingly, with automation and digitalization, you are able to make all of this efficient as well. And many a times, just so you people understand, this question comes up: does this mean need for lesser people? Absolutely not. What this means is you are able to do a lot more for less, right? So if let's say an organization is significantly growing, they obviously need to hire more and more people linearly to be able to support that growth. But if you automate and digitalize, you are able to probably grow without adding, linearly the same amount of people, right? Because people are able to do a lot more than what they were doing, because they are now enabled and aided by digital tools and automation around them. Of course, the ability to mass produce yet customize in the last mile. There are technologies out there that makes it available. Time to market, many of you are aware of. Take a smartphone or any of these wearables. I think it's all about the ability to get to market faster with cool features as soon as possible. And when you go back to some of these companies, I think these are these array of digital technologies that are helping these companies get to market faster than what they were able to do earlier, right? I wouldn't say these are the only 3 or 4 metrics that are important, but depending on the industry, depending on the organization we are talking about, the why of digital transformation first needs to be defined, right? And then what companies do is they start looking at what business metrics are important for them, and then they start mapping back to saying how digital technologies can help with those processes, right? And coming a little bit to some of the digital technologies or industry 4.0 technologies, I'm fairly sure that many of you may be familiar here, but if I were to touch a few of them, cloud computing, in simple terms, has what is called as infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, or software as a service. Traditionally, if you were to run a piece of software in an enterprise, you will go to a data center, you will get the software hosted in the data center. But today, or you might actually buy a server, you might spend capex and buy a server, and the company who is selling you the server will take about 10 weeks to ship the server. But that's no more the case. With cloud, all you need to do is you've got to have money with you, a credit card, and then you go ask for a server on the cloud, and that's provisioned. And if you have a piece of cool software that you want to deploy, it's not going to be taking more than 15 minutes to go buy a server on the cloud and doing it. So it's essentially helping bringing agility and in innovation, because you don't have to wait anymore for physical goods to be shipped, right, with the invention of cloud. And of course, many of you, I'm sure, have heard about ChatGPT and all the cool stuff that's happening with the large language models. A lot of that innovation obviously has been powered because of the compute and the resources that have been made available by the hyperscalers and the cloud providers, right? So cloud computing, you can say, is an important foundation for digital transformation, because that's where a lot of the innovation in digital stems from. Advanced analytics, we talked about it, whether it is sensor data in manufacturing, whether it is wearables, data from our wearables and watches that we all wear, or it could be data coming out of our vehicles. How do you get all of that and then start driving insights from that could drive action, right? So that's really what advanced analytics is all about. Industrial IoT, or Internet of Things, like again, gave the example of, let's say, a cyber physical object getting connected to an internet. That's base IoT. But industrial IoT would be that, let's say, if I have a boiler or a gas turbine running in my manufacturing plant, I can now connect that to a remote diagnostic center, because I've got sensors collecting information about that equipment. Now that data can be transferred over the internet onto a cloud, where somebody sitting in a very different place could actually now analyze the data, analyze efficiencies of this equipment, and then make recommendations on how to improve it from there, right? So in a very industrial organization context, this would be industrial IoT, but in a consumer context, it's what we've got the Internet of Things. Cybersecurity, again, for many of you who might be wanting to make a career in digital transformation, you might also want to look at cybersecurity as an area, right? Cybersecurity is today in enterprises becoming a board agenda. Why? Because the massive amount of data that have gotten created in the enterprises are now becoming a lot more valuable, right? It has information about people, it has information about assets, it has information about financials of a company, and they need to be kept protected. And obviously the evolving threat landscape around us, because the hackers are also obviously getting a lot more smarter. So the role of cybersecurity within organizations is increasingly becoming important over the last 5 to 7 years. And many of you may know there is a role called a Chief Information Security Officer, and he or she is responsible for making sure that you're able to protect all the digital data that the enterprises have, so that it's not stolen, and there is no ransomware sort of an attack on companies, right? So extremely important area, and a potentially good area for people looking to make a career in this space, right? Augmented reality, classic. Many of you would have watched a cricket match where you look at a physical ground, and then if you are able to augment, let's say, the score of the match or the batsman onto the ground, that means essentially you're looking at a physical object, a playground. But if you're able to superimpose data about that physical object in digital form, you're essentially augmenting digital information on top of a physical object. Or take an example of, let's say, you're walking through alongside your apartment and you're wearing, let's say, a Google Glass or or similar device. So essentially, you're able to see your apartment, which is the physical form, but maybe you're able to superimpose and see digital information about the apartment in terms of when it was built, who was the builder, and how many flats are available, how many have been sold, which then gets pulled from some data source. So that's really where you're augmenting digital information on top of a physical asset. And there are increasing number of use cases and applications of augmented reality and virtual reality in today's paradigm, particularly in the B2C context, that is, right? Big data, largely related to advanced analytics, because obviously today data is available in multiple forms. One is structured data, and another is what we call unstructured data. Unstructured data could be emails, it could be PDF documents, it could be scanned documents from older paper-based documents, several of those, right? Social media, the tweets and the posts that we get on social media. Now, how do you get all of the structured data and unstructured data into a massive database and then have the ability to run advanced analytics algorithm on this? That's really what big data is all about, right? Automation and robotics, I think, again, dates back to several decades. Many of you know companies like industries like automotive have relied on robots to perform many of the manufacturing tasks. And I think if I look at other industries as well, increasingly robotics is being used for safety hazardous, sort of task, because wherever you think the human, it's not conducive for, the work is not conducive for humans, That's why you're starting to apply some of the robotics within the industries, and I think that is yielding good results. Additive manufacturing, really quickly, is all about 3D printing, if you've heard about it. In a simple manufacturing industry context, it could mean, let's say, one of the spares of my pump or a compressor or one of the equipment fails. The earlier method would have been to make an order on a supplier who will again ship it physically, and it will take maybe a few weeks or months to get to the plant. But today you could just have a 3D printer that could print the spare and can be used immediately, right? It is gaining traction again if you look at spaces like industrial manufacturing. Simulation again have been around for at least 3 or 4 decades, but I think the power of cloud, the power of compute and other resources that are available today, I think you're able to simulate many order of magnitude higher scenarios than what you were able to do earlier, and able to get to better answers than what you were able to do earlier, right? And finally, I think we did talk about integration and interconnectedness of value chains. I think some of these technologies finally provide the ability to integrate across, let's say, from your supplier to the manufacturing to the customer, right? And that brings in efficiencies, that brings in reductions in cost and so on, right? So that's really the array of technologies, not to say that these are the only ones. As we know, and as I talked about the rate at which things are changing today, I think there are a lot more technologies that are coming to the fore that could be deployed. I mean, we're not talking about, for example, blockchain here. We are not talking about generative AI. Many of you may have heard about it and maybe using it in some form and shape today. So I think, but when you look at some of these are very fundamental to leveraging a collection of this when you embark on a digital transformation exercise. Now, switching gears a little bit, and it's, I mean, the crux of what I wanted to cover here. And this is, of course, my experience over the last 5-6 years of leading digital transformation for 2 large conglomerates. And when people talk about digital business transformation, I want you all to understand that there is no right or wrong or single definition to it, right? I think everybody takes an approach, everyone creates a framework that organizations follow, right? And here is what I sort of put through based on my experience of what I have seen in digital business transformations for large industrial organizations. So as you see here, think of this transformation programs into 3 key building blocks, right? One, what we may call the digital strategy, right? What is a digital strategy? Like I said at the beginning, you would want to understand what is the business's vision and what are some of the business's strategic objectives. It could be to grow market share. It could be to be the most cost efficient organization in the industry, or it could be to grow geographically, right? I mean, today you might be selling only in India and you might want to expand into other geographies. So depending on really what the business's strategic objectives are, you start thinking about what we may call use cases. And a use case is essentially using some of the technologies that we saw on the previous slide around Industry 4.0, those you use to drive certain business value, right? So essentially within a strategy exercise, the way it pans out is you would go and run workshops with different departments within the organization. It could be the operations team, it could be the finance team, it could be the HR team, trying to understand how do you use simulation or advanced analytics or IoT to drive business benefits and business value for that function, right? So that's really how the strategy workshops are held. And the final outcome of a digital strategy exercise is a simple roadmap document that calls out what initiatives for which function will drive a business value, and the ability to measure you know our ability to execute on that strategy is first you define for every initiative, you will calculate the business value either in INR or dollar terms. And then when you have a collection of, let's say, 50 or 100 initiatives, that might result in, let's say, 25 million or $30 million in annual business value, right? In some of the examples or experiences that I've had, in one of the large organizations, over an 18-month period, based on the different workshops that we did, we could identify really close to a 300 million in annualized business value based on digital technologies that we saw on the previous slide, right? So that's really the first block. You look at the combination of technologies. On one side, you look at the business problems and opportunities by functions on the other side, and it's really about marrying them to create use cases that drive clear business value, right? And you're then chasing a business value target. That's one. The second block, and an extremely important block where all of us would make a difference, is the people on the transformation. To be able to deliver on the first block, you need the right people and the structures, org structures, to be able to do it. Many a times in large enterprises, you might think of this transformation to be something that an IT team would do or a technology team would do. No, that's not how it's going to work, right? Because when you apply a machine learning algorithm to a key manufacturing process, the output of the algorithm is not going to be used by people in IT. It is going to be used by the operator who is sitting in the control room and operating the plant. So it's very important in this transformation exercise that we create the organization structure in a way that there are people from the business and people from the digital or technology organization who come together and partner with each other on a specific use case or an initiative. So getting the org structuring right is an extremely important building block in the transformation. The third one is capability, very related to the second block. Because over the last 5-7 years, there is so much of proliferation of different digital technologies. I think it has been difficult for people to keep up with the new knowledge that's sort of coming in. So it's very important that we are able to reskill and cross-skill people over a period of time for them to be able to support the transformation. In the specific example, we segmented the complete organization into 3 parts. One, we said, let's train the top 100 leaders of the organization. And that was important because if the top 100 leaders do not understand the language of digital and technology and some of the things that we talked about on the previous slide, then the rest of the organization is not going to understand. So it was very important for us to first train the top 100 leaders. Then the second segment was, we said we need a very specific specialist data science team. And again, some of you who are listening in, if you want a career in digital or digital transformation, I talked about cybersecurity, but data science and that area is another one which is becoming extremely important. Now, the nuance here is that, of course, we can do a course in data science and we can get that skill. But in practice, what we have seen is that people need to have the knowledge of the domain, the knowledge of data in the domain, and then the data science life cycle skills, right? Because if you are dealing with let's say a chemical manufacturing process, unless you understand a little bit about what the process is, what the chemical engineering around it is, and the data that makes up that process, even if you are a data science specialist, it's going to be difficult for you to build models that can be used practically in the end, right? So typically, the way this happens is we take chemical engineers, we take petroleum engineers, we take mechanical engineers and whatnot, and then train them on data science. But we also do the reverse, right? We take data scientists, people who are computer engineers or data trained in data science. We put them in the plant environment, make them sit with process engineers, chemical engineers, petroleum engineers, and make them understand the process. And typically, over a 12 to 14 months journey, you are able to create a pool of people who not only either understand data science or the chemical manufacturing process, they're able to understand both, right? So, and once you have a good critical mass of 30, 40 people, they are the ones then who are then driving some of the elements of transformation. And then finally, of course, a digital 101 for all, which essentially means everybody in the organization needs to understand the basics of digital. And I just wanted to share, if you already do not know, today NASSCOM runs what is called as a future skills program. You can just go Google around NASSCOM future skills. It is free for every Indian national. You can go and look up. There are an array of free digital courses there, and you can do as much as you want, right? And I mean, I think what large enterprises are now doing is leveraging this initiative, partnering with NASSCOM, and then delivering it for their employees. But as an Indian national, we can individually go register at the site and then start learning it. So I would urge many of you again who are wanting to have a career in digital, or even if you're not, because digital is becoming so important and pervasive within our lives, to start learning a little bit about this area. And this is one avenue, of course, that you could use, right? Some of the key capabilities, I think data science, I talked about it. Design thinking essentially is about problem solving in different ways, right? So traditionally, we are sometimes brought up to solve problems in only a certain way, right? With design thinking and some of the tools and techniques that are available there, I think we could look at problems very differently, and solve for it very differently, right? Agile is essentially, in simple terms, if a software project earlier took 12 months to deliver because you were building that one large monolithic system, today we talk about agile and what is called as a minimum viable product, or an MVP, which means essentially if you're building a mobile app, you are not waiting to build all the features until the end, but you're sort of slowly and progressively building things there, right? So agile again is an important capability that's in the transformation space, and some of you again wanting to pursue careers could look even agile as a topic, right? On the right side are a few key enablers. I think I just quickly touch some of them, so you're clear. Data platform, very important. We talked about the massive creation of data within enterprises and outside. A lot of these transformations start with first creation of a data platform. And this could be in Azure, it could be in AWS, it could be in any of the hyperscalers, or within your own enterprise, you could host something and create it. But it's important that you're able to get all internal and external data into a place for you to be able to start running or building models that could drive insight. So data platform is a key enabler. Startups at scale. Again, if you look at our country today, I'm sure you're reading news, massive amount of entrepreneurs looking at very niche areas of deep tech, innovation. I think again, in some of my last 5 years, we've had a leverage of more than 400, 500 startups that we've been able to use for advanced analytics, IoT, and whatnot, for them to come solve specific business problems. So I think, again, a very key ingredient in the transformation, if you're part of a digital transformation journey in any enterprise. Well, this Digital Olympics is a very specific example. In one of the companies that I work with, we created what is called as the Digital Olympics, because it's important that we build innovation bottoms up, right? So we created almost like a competition inside, where people could bring up an idea and they could pitch the idea like in a Shark Tank approach, and then get the idea funded. And then when they deliver the idea, they get a share of the gain or the value that we get from that idea being implemented, right? And then in a very typical Olympics way, we would give them a gold, silver, or a bronze medal from a virtual medal, and that really brought about a lot of bottoms up innovation within this organization. Of course, the top management, the focus from the top, extremely important in a transformation exercise like this. So rewards, recognition is important. Branding and communication, I mean, for particularly large industrial organizations who are traditionally seen as not early adopters of technology, I think it's extremely important for us to communicate both internally and externally what we are doing with technology interventions. Because if I were to hire people and young minds like some of you, we've got to be able to tell what we are doing within these industrial organizations with technology, right? So extremely important enabler here as well, right? I know we're probably sort of running out of time, but I'm not touching all enablers. I'm happy to answer any questions towards the end on this. In summary, 3 key building blocks. First, look at strategy and roadmap, and the outcome is really a dollar million or a INR value that we are chasing. Second, get the right organization structure to be able to deliver on that roadmap. And third, build capabilities within your enterprise so that they have the right skills to deliver on the program. And then, of course, there are technology enablers, ecosystem enablers that will come into play to drive your business transformation. Really quickly, again, one of the companies that I work for, when you look at the roadmap, very roughly, this is how it would look like, right? I mean, and of course, there will be details behind each of this that I'm showing here. But you essentially take any company and divide it into a value chain, right? There is research and development, there is supply chain, there is manufacturing, there is sales and marketing, and then there are huge capital projects. Now, when I talked about a use case, right? Now, if you look at under manufacturing, the first one called process digital twins. Now, this could be a use case because you are creating a digital twin of one of your plant processes, and then using the insights from the digital twin to optimize that process. And when I say optimize the process, it could be the energy that plant was consuming. Can you reduce it? If you're able to reduce it, obviously, then you're able to reduce your energy cost. Or are you able to produce the same output of the finished good with lesser amount of raw material? What that means is then you're spending less on raw material, your raw material cost reduces, right? So essentially, one use case in manufacturing is, can I create a process digital twin, which is essentially in practice an advanced analytics model, right? So it is trying to get data about the process, and then based on the historical performance of the process, the model then suggests what are the right parameters to operate the plant in, so that you are able to either reduce energy or reduce your raw material, right? There are, of course, other use cases that you could look at. In a supply chain scenario, if you take the first one, S&OP optimization, S&OP is sales and operations planning. Again, in simple layman terms, it means you've got suppliers supplying raw material, you've got the manufacturing plant and its capacity, and then you've got a demand from the customer. How do you ensure that you align all of this through digital tooling? So something like a S&OP digital solution provides you the ability to forecast demand or predict demand based on data. And then using that forecasted demand, you would plan manufacturing capacity. And using that manufacturing plant capacity, you would then stock raw material, right? So ability to data integrate your complete value chain and have predictive algorithms within that process is essentially S&OP use case, if you like. And in each of these cases, remember that in the previous slide, we talked about business value. The first exercise you would do is to understand, if you implement this digital tool, what is the business benefit and value in quantified terms that you would get? And when you have a collection of such 30, 40, 50, 200 initiatives, each of them having, let's say, a 1 million value or a 5 million value, will roll up to the final overall annualized value that you can bring from digital, which of course in this case, like I said, was about a roughly 300 million in annualized value, right? One other thing I just wanted to say was that while value is important, tangible value is extremely important. A lot of focus within organizations today is also on intangibles, right? Take in an industrial setup, safety, process and people safety. Humans are the biggest asset in any organization, and you want safety of people when they are working. Now, you can't measure in value terms safety of individuals. So if you're deploying a digital solution to improve safety, you're not going to be bothering about saying how much money this will bring, right? It is about making sure that you're able to provide safe environment for your employees and contractors. And again, just to bring home the point, a simple example of a safety use case that we deployed is many of these industrial companies have what is called as a CCTV camera, essentially like we have at our apartments and homes, looking at what's happening around. Now, there are companies and startups, what they do is they take the video feed from these CCTV cameras, and then they're able to use that video to run video analytics to say that if somebody is walking into the plant area without a protective equipment like a helmet or a safety harness, it is able to detect and alert the safety supervisor, and then they would go and ask them to wear the PPE and go to work, right? Or they would then call them and then make them aware and give them training so that they don't do that again, right? So there are now innovation happening where you could use existing video feeds and then run analytics to be able to improve safety and security in the workplace. And in this case, you would obviously not be sitting and trying to measure value. So think of transformation as having the ability to use this combination of technologies to drive value in tangible terms, but also there could be cases where it is just improving ease of doing business, improving safety and security in the organization, or similar such areas. Again, happy to answer questions. I'm not going to cover every use case here. But finally, before I sort of wrap up and open up for questions, I just want to touch on 2 or 3 of the best practices and to what Dr. Nagendra was saying at the beginning. I mean, I wouldn't call it myths, but I think I can tell you some of the important ingredients for digital transformation from an individual perspective, and some of you again wanting to build career in this. I think what you see to the right moves, the techno-functional competency development, right? Today, it's no more a place where you just learn one thing and you specialize deeply in it, and that becomes relevant. So I think at least in digital business transformation, you've got the ability to understand the functional area. It could be finance, it could be operations, it could be maintenance, it could be the insurance domain, it could be the financial services domain. And within that subdomains, you should have at least a broad understanding of what the business domain is, the data in the domain is, and what the broad business goals are. And then if you are a technologist, whether you are an expert in IoT or data science or whatnot, you are then able to solve problems in the business using one or more of these technologies. So if you're thinking about a career in this space or broadly, I think slowly and steadily, groom yourself for a techno-functional sort of a competency that will, where that is where the demand is, if you like, right? And I think in the transformation exercise, many a times people get excited about today. People are excited about Chat GPT. They're excited about large language models and so on. But I think in large enterprises and businesses, we look at what the problem is, what the opportunity is. Largely, you start from there and then say, can we solve it with one technology or an array of technologies? Yes, there are times when you would go and tell people about a few technologies so that it just opens up their mind for innovation. But if you look at a broad transformation, it's generally starting with the problem first or the opportunity first, and then seeing what you could apply to solve for the thing. Continuous learning, again, needless to say, with the rate at which new concepts and paradigms are emerging, I'll only urge that you use, if you're not already using some of the massive open online platforms that are out there, which could be Coursera, it could be EDX or whatnot. I also talked about the Future Skills program that's available nationally. So I think we all have avenues to go find learning content, but what's important is year on year, month on month, we focus on learning and updating ourselves with what's going on new, regardless of which area or sphere of work we work in, right? I again don't want to touch each of them. Reverse mentoring, I'm not sure relevant for the audience and the age here, but like people like me, I think I have a teenage son and a daughter. So if I look back at my 5-7 years, I think the amount of digital that I've learned from them in my personal life, I think that's massive. All I would say is stay close to your next generation and see how they use devices and things like that. I think they're born native, digitally native. So I think at the workplace as well, I think this is a very common concept today. When you have the older generation, you sort of partner them with the younger generation that is coming into the workforce. So there is two-way learning, right? I think it's not only the younger one learning from the experienced person, but the experienced person learning from the younger ones in terms of usage of digital tooling and so on. So reverse mentoring is, of course, becoming an extremely important concept, right? Again, I think I know I'm at the 3 minutes beyond 7, but if I can pause here, maybe open it up for a set of questions, happy to do that. But yeah, and that's really what I wanted to cover in terms of the journey and experience that I'd gone through. Happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Anand. I really appreciate your time, and it's in the beginning, it's such a large canvas, right? I think, the kind of finesse that you brought to the table is phenomenal. I think from your personal journey to the professions, it's amazing. Now, I think we have quite a few questions, but I'll just take 2 questions with your permission, if that's okay with you, Anand. Right? And firstly, there is a question from Abhishek Kumar. His question with
Dr. Nagendra, I'm losing you a little bit, but
AI. Thank you, Abhishek. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question from Ms. Abhishek Kumar, and his question is: are we achieving digital transformation with AI?
No, absolutely. So I think let me explain this a little bit, right? I mean, if you ask me, are we achieving digital transformation with AI? The answer is yes. Are we achieving it in every use case, every place we try it? The answer is no, right? Because um, this is a this is a space where, data, the volume of data, the quality of data that we have is extremely important, right? And in every use case that you look at, you're not going to have the same quantity of data and the quality of data that you need to build AI models, right? If and when I say, are we delivering transformation with AI? And the answer is yes. The business value of, let's say, the 300 million that I showed you in some of my experience, if you look at the use cases, Abhishek, roughly 70% of those use cases are AI and ML driven, right? Ability to use AI ML models to optimize energy, ability to predict demand for your products, ability to predict which customer will churn and look at strategies to retain them, ability to recommend related products when a customer goes into an e-commerce portal, ability to see how do you optimally stock raw materials, which means then you're optimizing your overall working capital. So absolutely, the answer is yes, but we also need to be cautious that look, there would be cases where there would not be enough data to be able to build models, and there, of course, there are today techniques that you use and progressively improve the model to be able to generate the value that you wanted to do. So I hope that clarifies, Abhishek.
Thank you, Anand. Maybe the last question, I think, we're just running out of time. Just with your permission, last question for the evening, Anand. I think one of the things that we get to see in India is, I think, the people said that triad of, Aadhaar, then UPI, and the database management, right? I think that's something that we have seen it so much so that I think now what you get to see, for example, in Bangalore, and I think if I'm right, just about a few months ago, the Auto Drivers Union, they have created their own app, right, called as a Namma Yatra, right? And there, so I mean, likewise, you'll see in the agricultural sector, etc. But then this has become so popular that now, I think they have given, right, I mean, some sort of competition to Ubers and Olas of the world, where the auto drivers themselves have come together. They've started their own app. Now, the question that I would like to ask you is that, do you get to see, the kind of democratization that is happening as far as the digitalization is concerned, Anand?
No, absolutely, Dr. Nagendra. I think, and that's why I kept saying that today, digital is so embedded within everyone's life that you can no more ignore it, right? And if you take the examples of the large language models, the chat GPTs and the others that have emerged, I think it is democratizing technology to a level where it's sometimes scary that what it can do, but at the same time, I think it's also improving and improving lifestyle and life for people. Letting them earn livelihoods, which probably wasn't possible earlier, right? So I think democratization is another thing that over the last 3-4 years, because of technology, that has accelerated. And in my experience, again, keeping ourselves abreast and getting ourselves trained on what's happening and coming in new is extremely important for us to be able to leverage that, right? So I absolutely feel that's a trend that's in there. Even within enterprises, Dr. Nagendra, that's why we do the broad-based training, because at the end of the day, the transformation exercise is not about just a one-time program where you run a few initiatives or a use case and create value. You want it to sustain itself. You want, if you have 15,000 employees in the company, you want to democratize technology to a level where everyone is able to use it and contribute and create value for themselves as well as the organization, right? So that's a key theme, and people need to be, I would say, learning all the time to be able to leverage and gain from it.
Thank you so much, Anand. And in fact, we have few questions. Gaurav and Vijay, I would be extremely sorry for taking it up, but both of your questions. But definitely, I think maybe you can check, get in touch with Anand, and he'll be more than happy. Just the fact that we've already passed 7 o'clock. 10 minutes we've exceeded. Just excuse us. But thank you so much, Anand, for your time, especially on a Saturday evening, and definitely thanks to all for one participant as always, for being. I think and to take a what the native experience, the words takes to democracy. It is when every in the company has to that's how we have in the company. One again, Anand, will play absolute pleasure host for maybe with the